Welcome to our 48th podcast. Today, we'll be talking about creating habits and rituals to sustain change. What's one thing you can do now to ensure your hard won changes stick around through habits and rituals? Keep listening to find out. Welcome to Harmonious Workplaces, a podcast about corporate culture, organizational change management, and workplace behavior. Harmonious Workplaces was started by independent consultants Rich Cruz, Ben Kleinman, and Cheryl Volpe to explore, challenge, and build on various organizational culture and change management concepts. It's a blend of theory and practice based on their personal and professional experiences working with companies of all sizes across various industries. If you own a business, lead a team, want new ideas about the corporate environment, or just want to listen to a group of consultants talking about how to make work more enjoyable, we invite you to sit back, relax, and dive in with us to Harmonious Workplaces. Hello, Harmonious Workplaces listeners. We're so glad to have you with us today. I'm really excited about today's episode. My name is Rich Cruz. I'm an organizational development consultant, and I'm joined today with our co-host, Ben Kleinman. Hi, Ben.
Hey, everyone.
And Cheryl Volpe. Hey, Cheryl.
Hi, everyone. Hi, Rich.
And today we're going to talk a little culture. Yeah. So, and part of that is, we've talked about culture before, but we're really going to talk today about habits and rituals in the workplace. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Love it.
Yeah. And kind of how those can be so important in building those circles of trust and helping to get an organization together before and during and after a change event or anything like that.
For sure. Yeah. So I actually recently, last week, talked about culture in my management principles class. And I asked the class, when you think of rituals, what comes to mind? First, I got dead silence. It's 7 something in the morning because nobody's awake yet. But you start talking a little bit more and it starts to come out, right? The first thing everybody started to talk about, and go figure, it's a Christian school, is talk about church, right? We think about our churches or synagogues, we think about how we interact with people on that religious scale. But there's so many, like every day we've got rituals, right? We've got things that we do as a society, as a community. I mean, the Pledge of Allegiance, right, is one that comes to mind for me, right? Should we maybe define ritual in this
Yeah, I was thinking
sense?
maybe before we dig too deep, because I like where you're going with some of the religious, faith-based kind of things, just as familiar things that most people in our culture will understand. But
Right.
also, let's maybe define habits versus rituals, and then we can see how those are going to play into things.
Yeah, for sure.
So,
So yeah, go ahead, Cheryl.
it sounds great. I think you should
So
do it. I was just,
we'll do that.
yeah.
Right on. I need the validation. Thank you so much. I crave it every second of the day.
Need a
And you read
validation
it.
ritual.
Oh, that would be great. Just when we start at the whole, what's that Smalley, I'm good
Yeah,
enough, I'm smart enough. Doggone it, people like
people like
me.
you.
Affirmation. Yes.
Yeah.
That's very, that's very,
We should start.
I'm a little distracted by the idea that this very thing that we are doing is a ritual. We have, it has been an unwavering ritual for us. And our listeners know that we haven't missed since you guys kicked it off over a year ago. And now here we are. And I don't want to distract from the definitions of ritual and culture and its place in the workplace. But this is our workplace ritual. We
That's
are in
right.
different cities, so
Right.
this is what we
Right.
are doing. We are living it.
Look, we're 7 a.m. in the morning, Central Time, 8 a.m. Eastern Time, right? The three of us log in here.
Listen to a little Gwen Stefani and rock and roll.
There's a little bit of that happens. There's a whole lot of silliness, but we do this with intention and meaning. And there's that part of it, right? Whereas, if we look at a habit, right? So a habit are those actions that are done often without thought. This is just how we roll, right? And so the real difference here is intentionality. Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah. And you can have habits and rituals that are positive and habits and rituals that are negative. I think those are,
right,
there's no necessarily included connotation with either one.
right, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sure, certain habits lead to addiction. We are familiar with these tropes. Not these not tropes. These are real life
Oh,
issues and problems that
Oh,
people
sure.
all
yeah,
around us.
that's right.
Well,
We're
even
drinking our coffee. We have an addiction to this ritual in our little mugs. I mean, it's everywhere.
In all fairness, this is just water. But
Wow.
I did have a really big coffee before we started. So yes, you're
Ah,
absolutely right. It
you
has
are
to start my day.
you are breaking the myth. You are revealing the secrets of your habits and ritual.
Well, I'm going to bring something that's not in the notes here, but it's a book I've read maybe 5 times now. It's a pretty controversial book, actually. If you've heard of Napoleon Hill,
yes.
yeah, Think and Grow Rich, that book, right?
Yes.
So, uh, pretty popular, somewhat polarizing figure in business literature, right? So he wrote this book after the Depression called Outwitting the Devil. And it's a it's a story. So that he's actually interviewing the devil. It's so you can imagine, earlier in the century, they were really, or not this century, last century, right? They were really scared about any fallout. So it actually never it wasn't published until 2011.
When did he write it, Rich?
I don't exactly remember, but it was in the 40s, I think, or 30s. So it's been a while. Like
Okay.
it
So like 80, 90 years ago.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
it remained under wraps. So, but what he talked about were three things that successful people have, and those three things also are problems with people, right? So the first thing is definiteness of purpose. Um, so that's the intentionality part, right? The second thing is what he calls the law of hypnotic rhythm, which is habit, right? So when things are happening, we just, fall into some kind
You
of
do it
habit.
without thinking. Yeah.
Right. Exactly. And then the third part is timing, patience, and allowing things to happen in their time. So as you can imagine, like if we have good rituals with good habits over time, we'll have success, right? But the converse of that is, instead of a ritual intentionality, you are drifting. You drift if you can fall into patterns of binge watching stuff on, whatever. That's my personal, like, that's the thing I do all the time, right? Uh, or any number of other things. And when that happens, that becomes habit. We're not even thinking about it anymore. So that ritual now, that lack of ritual becomes habit, and things can unravel fairly quickly.
And all of a sudden you're at the bottom of the pint of Ben and Jerry's going, what just happened?
That's right.
Right. And on the theme with the devil, Rich, first of all, it's interesting that that was written during, leading up to and during World War II, right? There were all different kinds of conversations about evil and the devil, not necessarily related to business at that same time. So that's fascinating. And then going back to this idea of the legend of Dr. Faustus, he was an academic that felt like he had learned everything and had no purpose left. And he ends up striking the deal with the devil such that
Oh,
he trades his soul for fantastical entertainment and new experiences and a richer life, not really thinking that he was going to have to pay for that at the end. So that's a whole other thing. But this idea that without ritual, without purpose, without satisfaction, right? We can meander, and we can meander into habits and rituals and dangerous places, not necessarily a conversation at a bar with the devil still at your soul,
Right.
but
Right. Right. Does it? Yeah.
yeah,
Exactly.
yeah.
Exactly.
So there are good and bad habits for sure. And in business, one of my favorite experiences with any kind of ritual is that inclusion, right?
Mm.
That
Hmm.
feeling of, I know what's going to happen when I get to work with the team that I enjoy working with, right?
Right.
And
Exactly.
hopefully that level of inclusion in healthy, harmonious workplaces can be sustained, right?
Yeah.
Good and
Perfect.
happy rituals that the team looks forward to without being forced into them.
Right.
There's an upside and a downside to that team mentality, especially if you're in group, out group.
Perfect. Let's do this. I let's dive into those habits and rituals as they relate to the workplace. You teed it up perfectly. But let's take a quick break, and we come back. We'll start talking about that. How's that?
Sounds good. And just to close the loop, I think the book was 1937 or 38.
38. There you go. Right on.
Incredible.
Cool. Yep.
Okay. We'll be back.
All right, folks. We'll be right back. Dysfunctional organizational cultures and poorly managed transformations can devastate employee morale and motivation, leading to disengaged employees, poor work quality, and the loss of your best people. The impacts to your organization include high costs, low productivity, and wasted resources. At Harmonious Workplaces, our purpose is to help you build the best workplace possible. We are advisors applying proven organizational development and industrial organizational psychology methodologies to help you become your best organization. We are doers, using time-tested principles to help you execute organizational change initiatives smoothly and successfully. To discover how harmonious workplaces can impact your organization, visit www.harmoniousworkplaces.com and book a free 30-minute information session with one of our consultants today. Again, that's www.harmoniousworkplaces.com. And we're back. So we have been talking about habits and rituals, and we kind of described what those are, but how do those fit in the workplace, right? And Ben, you put in the notes here a Harvard Business Review
Yeah,
article.
I came across an article in the Harvard Business Review by Zakur and Noonan Hadley, and they were defining rituals as collective activities that members of a team engage in regularly and to which they attribute meaning. So that's exactly what we were just saying at the top of the show, slightly more scientific and academically, but it's
Sure.
essentially those things that you do with intention. And in this sense, you're trying to um, think about things like icebreakers, team check-ins, team retrospectives, or project retrospectives. You might have formal onboarding processes, something that we've talked about on previous shows in terms of how you bridge those in-group, out-group kind of things and bringing new people into the circle, that kind of thing. Mentorship can help with that. So we've talked about some of that as well. What I
Yep.
really liked about their article was that they did have some metrics, and this was based on experience they had with a client of theirs that they were consulting with. And so, take it for what it's worth, but it's interesting and probably carries forward on many other consulting engagements, many other projects, many other companies, to where
Sure.
some of their rituals and the work that they were doing with those teams showed just really interesting boosts, essentially. So the teams that had engaged more regularly in more rituals, so there's some component of volume and time
Mm,
to what you were saying about that running with the devil book. You
Right.
have to do these a lot, do a lot of them, I should say, and do
Yeah.
them often or at least
Sure.
regularly. So there's that volume and time thing that factors in,
Yep.
but they found in their experiment anyways that 23% of the folks on those teams that did engage in rituals more regularly and more often, and more of them were more 23% more committed to their team's purpose.
Mm,
They experienced a 20% boost in their levels of psychological safety. They achieved 28% greater interpersonal knowledge. So that knowledge transfer,
sure.
knowing of other people on the
Of
team,
other
so
people.
essentially building
Yeah.
trust and getting to know each other a little bit more,
Right.
which dovetails with the psychological safety and being committed to their team's purpose. And then lastly, 22% reported higher job satisfaction, which we've talked about leads in many cases to people staying around longer, having a more positive, more harmonious workplace, to there being a lot more productivity from those teams. And at the end of the day, the company tends to do better when people stay around and are more productive and working well with each other. So I just thought that those were really neat s- statistics that they found it again just in their trials, and it seems like their big takeaways were that the rituals provided a sense of certainty and connection and space for employees to engage with each other and connect about the purpose of their work. So they were sort of building on each other's levels of happiness and satisfaction and purposefulness within their workspace. And in that sense, rituals became a bit of a stabilizing force to help unite their culture, bring employees through whatever changes might be coming or transitions might be coming, whether internal changes or external factors that might be causing stress. So it just seemed like once you have these rituals, assuming they're positive rituals, they can
Sure.
serve as kind of a bulwark or a bedrock for when things get a little bit stormy or you do have to go through change. So maybe the timing of creating rituals is also important. So while you may enjoy camaraderie going through a tough spell, like, hey, we're all in the trenches, we're putting in the extra time, we're going to come through stronger, and we bond over this. The time to build really healthy relationships is not in great times of stress. To do that is
Hmm.
a way to avoid those kinds of challenges in the future.
Sure.
That's a lot. I've just said a whole lot.
Oh, you said a lot of great stuff.
I will pause. Reflect.
Well, uh, so I mean, I think this aligns very well with things that we've talked about perceived organizational support, right? Where people feel that they can um, have a good relationship with their management, right? This feels very much aligned
And we've talked about
with
and
that.
we've shared data. Sorry, Rich, just to build on that, we've talked about and we've shared data showing that that manager managee relationship is kind of the linchpin of whether someone is happy and
Right,
stays at work. And the
right.
delta between what the manager thinks and what the managee thinks or the worker thinks, the greater that delta is about how each is doing and perceiving their relationship is often a good signal of how likely that worker is to stay and how productive that worker can be.
Yeah, yeah.
Sorry, go ahead.
No, yeah, and it leads me to thinking about there are some different models that are out there. From a project management standpoint, you've got agile who have you have daily huddles, you have these 2 week sprints with a meeting after that, which they all have these rather specific um, agendas for each one of those because you need to kind of just blow through it. 15 minutes, we're in and out, right? But people feel good about it. They can connect with each other, and I can see how that aligns people with the purpose and all that. I've seen where in some engagement surveys, they'll put, I understand the company's vision, or I understand the direction the company's going. And sometimes those are fairly low scores. But in these situations where you don't want to have like meetings just to have meetings, right? But if you have a ritualistic meeting that follows a pattern and people are um, aligned with it, and it's short, right? It's not wasting everybody's time for hours.
Yeah.
Uh, it can be a really powerful morale booster.
Yeah. When I worked in entertainment in cycles of high production activity, we had stand-ups, and they were called stand-ups because the idea was that you were literally standing at your desk. They had to be short enough and condensed enough that they're called stand-ups because of that. You're
Yeah. It's the same in agile
exactly.
practitioner world as well.
Right.
And
Yeah.
what's cool too about agile stand-ups is that everyone is expected to speak. Everyone's expected to say, "Here's what I'm working on.
Yeah.
Here's where I need help from you or you," that kind of thing. And so it
Yep.
helps build that sense of we're all in it together, but we're all trusting each other. We're all going to speak up and say, "I need help from you," or "I have this done for you. Please take a look at it." And so it's building those network connections
Yeah.
Accountability.
and accountability. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And making it concise. That it was a skill to get better and better at those, to get everything you needed out of it, to allow everyone else to get everything they needed out of it in the shortest amount of time possible.
Absolutely.
You would
Yep.
time it. Yeah.
Yeah. Right. That. So, like when I'm talking with groups about like an effective way of holding meetings, right? You have a leader, you have a note taker, somebody's taking the minutes, a scribe, right? And then you have a timekeeper who keeps it on the agenda, right? Oh, we're nearing that 5 minute mark. We're nearing that 15 or whatever. Um, and there's a system out there called EOS, which is the Entrepreneur Operating System, which came from a book called Rocket Fuel, and then a follow-up book called Traction by Gino Wickman and Mark Winters.
Oh,
And they have these what they call level 10 meetings, which are very open meetings, and there's a very ritualistic format to them where you set and then you set and then review what are called the rocks, right? And the rocks are your SMART goals, right? But it's it's the vernacular that you're using in the system plus
mhm.
the actual format, and when people are accustomed to it, if it deviates from that, it's shocking, right?
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Yeah, it
Mm.
stands out.
Did you just say that they have smart rocks?
Smart rocks. Yeah, the SMART goals are called rocks because they're heavy and there's weight to them, and you're kind of chained to them. Don't quote me on that, but I know that's what they call them, but I don't remember why they call it. It's a little weird,
Well, is it related to
but
the acronym? It's
I
the
have
acronym, right?
no. I
That
don't
would
think
make
there's
sense.
any. I don't think there's any acronym to it. They just call them rocks. Um, we can't remember why, but you can look it up.
Mhm.
Do
You're
what I
giving
tell
our
my
listeners
kids.
homework? Oh
Yeah,
my
do what I
gosh,
tell my
you are a
kids.
professor.
Yeah, go look it up.
Don't ask me.
Bring your citations.
That's right.
Verify your
That's right.
sources.
APA formatting, please, when you put your comments in the notes there.
So maybe, maybe we take a break and come back
Yeah,
and think
I love it.
about rituals and habits in the workplace and how to make them forces for good and how to keep these things so that they stick through times of thick and thin.
I love it. All
Sounds
right.
great.
We'll be right back. At Harmonious Workplaces, we believe work should provide purpose, satisfaction, and growth. We empower people to thrive by fostering environments where individuals can find meaning in their work and organizations can succeed through thoughtful, well executed strategies. We're committed to making work better for the people who do it and the leaders who guide them. To discover how harmonious workplaces can impact your organization, visit www.harmoniousworkplaces.com and book a free 30-minute information session with one of our consultants today. Again, that's www.harmoniousworkplaces.com. And we're back. So we've been talking about rituals and habits, and what kind of takeaway can we have from this discussion? I think we covered a lot of ground in a fairly short amount of time here. Of course,
Yeah, we've been
Pretty much
scratching the
scratching the
surface.
surface.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Rituals and habits, we have talked a lot in the past about culture with the mission statement,
Yeah.
vision, and values. And has it been in your experience, each of you, that there has been vision and values, mission statements of the companies you've been at? And are there habits and rituals, examples you can think of that tied into those other smart rocks of a company, essentially the mission, vision, and values, even code of conduct,
Sure.
right?
Yeah. Um, we've talked about this before, but I want to bring it up again. Edgar Schein's model of culture, which if you imagine an iceberg, right? Down at the bottom, you have the assumptions of why are we here, right? That's the why. Then you have still underneath the water, you have the values, right? That are the espoused values. So they're shared within the organization. People are actually talking about this, right? Um, and this gives purpose to the artifacts at the top. The artifacts are the signs, symbols, and rituals of outwardly expressing those espoused values, right? And when I've seen that an organization, and the studies show this too, right? If the organization has strong values and they're building that within, within the organization from, from a leadership standpoint, through communication, through signs, and I mean, like if you walk through some offices, you'll have mantras or you'll have different artifacts on the wall, that really show about what this place is about, right? And I think those outward signs, um, along with the way that people do things, right? From a process standpoint, as well as from an interpersonal standpoint and how people work within groups. Um, if that if that aligns to those values, think about like Disney when you go to a Disney park, right? There's a very specific way that people are, and sometimes it's it's caricatured, right? But at the same time, they're very consistent, right? And it's part of the brand, right? And people tend to stick around.
Absolutely.
You know?
It's almost shocking. If it even happens anymore, it's almost if you go through an interview, application interview, and hiring process, it it seems like it would be impossible in this day and age to not already know the vision, values, and mission of the company that just hired you, such that retention should be fairly high, right? You know what you're getting into because of things like Glassdoor, Reddit, right? There's pie charts, how much is the CEO liked here, right? And there's
Mhm,
hundreds of
mhm.
reviews with, 4.5 stars. Whether or not any of that is actually true, because there are negative things on. So I think people do use resources like that to gauge a company's culture before they even apply,
Sure.
right? And I think that the success of rituals and the vision and the value and the mission statement, how deeply that resonates with the people that work in these companies is how they align with what the person's bringing,
Mhm, mhm.
right? How big is the
Yeah,
gap,
yep.
right? And that influences engagement. It's all connected.
So why do we have then? If if we have all these companies and we have all this basically, we have all this transparency out there.
Right.
By the way, it's Tuesday, Ben. It's Transparency Tuesday.
More
That's
and
So
right.
more. We look
appropriate.
forward to that.
Ben
Nice.
puts out a Transparency Tuesday on LinkedIn every Tuesday. So be
There you
sure
go.
to connect with them. But being if there's all that transparency, then why are businesses constantly saying, I can't keep good people or I can't find.
It's a great question.
I was gonna think maybe that accountability and intentionality has a lot to do with it. I mean, Cheryl, what you were just saying about people who are interviewing for jobs, if you're not intentional about really bringing in the right people for your organization in the right role at the right time,
Yeah.
you're going to get a lot of people who are coming in the door who may be very good people, are very skilled, but they're just not in the right role at the right time. And that's going to lead to problems and a lot of turnover and things like that. I think where I've seen it work really well in terms of, you have a lot of companies that have values and mission statements and stuff like that on the walls and in their training materials. But when you have leaders and colleagues of yours that are walking the walk every single day and saying, this is a great example team of a way that we support each other, and this was a great meeting because we all held each other accountable. Or in a one-on-one, someone might take someone aside, and it doesn't have to be a manager; it could be a colleague, and say, "Hey, when you were saying that at the meeting, it came across in a really negative way, and I think you want to maybe consider phrasing things differently so that your peers don't think you're a complete XYZ or whatever." And it's just those kinds of things, the little things day in and day out, those that really build that world that lives up to those values. And that's where I see it moving the needle. And that's
Mm,
hard work. A lot of people
sure.
don't like that intellectual honesty and that rigor, and that it can be very difficult.
Yep.
Absolutely, because of insecurities, fear, imposter syndrome, crisis of confidence, feeling like you're being judged and not taking it as a
All of
possibility
that.
to grow,
Yeah. All
right?
of that. Yeah.
Yeah. And that's why rituals to build the psychological safety, camaraderie, caring
Right.
can make those conversations a little bit easier. Still not
Right.
easy, but
Well, and sometimes I've seen it work really well when companies build in a meeting where they're trying to get a decision made. Someone or many people will take that role of devil's advocate, and people will intentionally ask the meeting. No, not necessarily, but in the meeting, leaders will say, "Is there any information that we've left out? Is there any information that would say this is not a good decision?" And then that really pushes people to think and speak up and say, this may not be a good idea because of XYZ. And just being intentional about that can make such a big difference, and avoid that groupthink, which deteriorates all of these, mission, vision, values, that kind of stuff. Unless that's your company's goal, that groupthink. I mean, I don't want to get in your way. That's
I
not
just
necessary.
don't.
We just had a guest who
Oh
was
my
saying that
gosh.
groupthink is the antithesis of productivity and innovation. So take that for what it's worth.
I love how you tied that together, Ben. Thank you. Yes.
But you were saying,
It's it,
Charlie, it's all interweaved, interwoved, interwoven, interleaved, interlaced,
It's woved.
woved. I like it.
well,
Sorry, Rich, I cut you off.
oh no, no, that's okay. That's okay. I was just gonna say uh, you know, I, how do I put this? In certain workplaces, right? What happens is that there's this level of comfort that happens, and it's kind of that I'm going to go back to like the hypnotic rhythm, right? Of this is status quo, this is what we do, and so you mentioned earlier stability, right? Like that's the second tier of Maslow's hierarchy of needs type of deal, right? People want that stability, and it can so those rituals can turn into some habits that cause us to not be resilient when those changes happen because we just,
Become brittle.
you know, yeah, yeah, something changes and we're even if it's bad stuff, frankly, right? It can it can fracture our that stability, that feeling of stability. And we kind of mourn, the loss. I mean, it's kind of that Bridges model, right? The
Hmm.
letting go, the new ending, or ending before we get to
I
a new
wonder
beginning.
if there's something that we have to think about when you have a ritual. As a leader, you have to believe in it, and your team has to believe in it, and the
Right.
people have to really buy into what the ritual is and where it's taking them.
Yeah.
But you have to latch on more to that group sort of participation and having that further the purpose than the actual ritual itself.
Right.
So if that ritual becomes something that is leading to sort of stasis or people just doing it because it's always been the way it's done and that's no longer a productive thing for the company, then you have to jettison that ritual. You have to say, okay, we're not going to do this anymore. We're still
Hmm.
going to do something that keeps our camaraderie and that furthers the purpose of our team and our company, but we're
Right.
not going to do it in this way.
Sure.
That also takes a lot of guts from a leader to do that.
Oh,
Absolutely.
wait, you're talking about, let me think, change.
Oh, surprise, surprise.
It's hard sometimes. There's resistance. Actually, we always, obviously, we talk a lot about change, but we don't often talk about change in a grieving process where the change is something truly, truly longed for and missed on this
Hmm.
level.
Ooh.
Hmm.
Stay tuned, podcast listeners. Maybe next week.
Yeah, that
Oh,
sounds like a good tee up
Grieving
for a future.
change.
maybe
Hmm.
something shouldn't be changed.
That's that. How often does that happen? It's
Ooh,
true. Truth.
ooh.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Well, wow. We don't have time to do a whole new podcast
We have to
today
balance.
on that,
What's my
but
pick?
holy moly, you
Not right
just
now, but next
That's
week.
Pandora's box. That's awesome. Yeah, let's do that. Um, but in terms of this discussion, what's something that our viewers or listeners can take away from this? Just something to think about.
I would like for anyone listening to consider their personal rituals. For example, some people
Mm,
have to meditate when they get to their desk. Some people have to do things that, aside from what is it, microwaving fish in the shared kitchen for lunch, like, I don't recommend that you do that. But if you have an individual ritual, be brave about it if it's important to you.
sure.
And it can show a personal side of yourself that you have to be, it might make you vulnerable on one hand, but can share some of that authenticity about who you are and what you value. So we did talk a lot about company visions and values and mission statements, but there are also personal rituals that might
Absolutely.
make us want to stand out a little bit
Yeah.
in a
Yeah.
friendly way.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, look, athletes do this kind of stuff all the time, right? They have
Oh, yeah.
their own personal rituals before, and then I'm not wearing my Ted Lasso socks today, but I often wear Ted Lasso socks because it reminds me of like, you can have those, pregame
Talisman.
meetings,
Oh,
right? Oh, the talisman. Yes. Right. Yes. Yes. Exactly. These artifacts and rituals that can keep everybody, on task and aligned. Um, so I would encourage the listeners to, I totally agree with you, Cheryl, embrace your own personal rituals, but develop something that is positive that can become habitual.
Yeah.
What
I
do you
think
got?
there's all of that is great, and there's an element of believing in what the ritual is and what it's meant to do, and then just being disciplined about doing it regularly, whether it's a daily ritual or a weekly ritual or something that's on a different cadence. You have to believe in it and you have to do it regularly, and then you have to be willing to change it if it's starting to become unhealthy.
Yeah.
that's a good reminder.
Yeah. Wow, good one.
All right, folks.
I like it.
That's a wrap today. Boy. Well, folks, thank you all for joining us. If you see us out there, make sure you comment on our YouTube or wherever you find us on social media. So you'll find us on YouTube and LinkedIn, Podbean, Spotify, Apple, iHeartRadio, Amazon, all those great places. If you find us,
You can
give
also
us a
find our book
like.
on Amazon.
You
Mm,
can find our book on
yes.
Amazon as well, for sure. So,
And
We
share
will,
with your friends.
please.
If something resonates, send them a link. Give them a listen to.
Could be a nice little ritual for you once a week to share
Oh, yeah.
to share our podcast. So, um, again, thanks for joining us. And as always, make change your friend. Thanks for listening to Harmonious Workplaces. You can find Harmonious Workplaces on LinkedIn, Twitter, YouTube, Spotify, Amazon, Apple, and other streaming platforms. We'd love any feedback on whatever channel you find us on. Please rate, like, and share our podcast with your network, and remember to add Harmonious Workplaces to your list of favorites to get notified about each new episode. To contact Rich or Cheryl, please visit www.workbalanceconsulting.com. To connect with Ben, find him on LinkedIn or visit at www.harborsidestrategy.com.